facing your failures. That's my point with Pastor Mark Boykin. We've been talking about failure for the last 3 days, and maybe it's a little bit depressing, but yet it's a reality because we all face failures. Even this week, I'll bet you have met people who have talked to you about how to overcome failure. Maybe they have failed in their marriage. Maybe they have failed in their business. Maybe they have failed in relationships, and they've talked to you, or maybe you yourself have faced failure recently. Pastor, how do I pick up and go forward? How do I deal with failure, the humiliation, the embarrassment, the denial, the fleeing, the isolation that failure brings? And so many people today are living lives of quiet desperation because, quite honestly, and to be specific, they don't know how to handle failure. The Word of God is replete with people who have failed. Moses, the great emancipator, he failed miserably. He murdered a man and then tried to run away and hide. David committed adultery. After he murdered Uriah, he tried to cover his sin. He tried to deny. He tried to run away from it. So many times we face the same quandary. What do I do with this failure, the humiliation, the embarrassment? My family, my friends, people no longer trust me because of failure. You know what? That isn't true. Failure is a part of life. Failure is a part of the human experience. Every one of us has failed at some point. Now, here are my 3 points today, and it's found out of Luke chapter 5 again. I'll be preaching on this on Sunday when Jesus was standing by the lake called Galilee, and there was such a multitude of people that were pressing upon him that he needed a place to a platform, if you will, to preach from, and he saw 2 boats that were empty. They were empty because the disciples had been out fishing all night long and they had failed. They had caught nothing. And then we talked about how it says the boats were empty. It's because the disciples had left. They were over washing their nets, kind of washing their hands of the failure. Now we pick up the narrative in verse 4. It says, "Now when he had left speaking or preaching to the multitudes, he said unto Simon, Launch out into the deep." Here's the first point. You must pick up and begin again. After failure, you must be willing to pick up where you are and begin again. I know it's painful. I know it's difficult. I know you'd rather do 1,000 other things than pick up and begin again, but that's where you start. Jesus is saying to you today, pick up and begin again. Even after that relationship that burned you, pick up and move on. You've got to pick up the pieces and move on. You never thought you could, but with God you can. Number 2, it says in verse 4, launch out into the deep. Now this means before, maybe they were only a few 100 feet out, but this time Jesus says, let's go even farther. And for your life, you're saying, well, I was burned at this place. I failed at this level. Jesus doesn't say, okay, then come back where it's safer. Come back to a more moderate area, one that you can control. No, he is saying this time, I want you to go out even farther than where you were when you failed. Isn't that good news that Jesus is saying you can win? This time, you're going to go out farther than you were. You failed at this place, but you're not going to stay. You're not going to be limited by your failure. And so many people today, you included, you are limited by your failure. Your failure begins to squeeze you. Your failure begins to delineate the area that you can be successful in. And it has been squandered so much that there's this small area that you're working in when in fact you need to break the mold and go out into the deep. That's where the victory is going to be. Jesus said, launch out into the deep. This time it's going to be different. This time it's going to be better. And number 3, the change of expectations. Simon said to him in verse 5, he said to him, Master, we have toiled all the night. We've toiled all night long. You know what? You have to change your expectations. What do you mean, Pastor? Well, he said, we toiled all night. So the expectation is, okay, we're going to have to toil all night again. And that's the way. That's what keeps people from being successful. They think the thing that they failed at before is the mold. And therefore, because I know what that was, I'm expecting the same place, the same response. No. This time, there's a change of expectations. This time, you're not going to toil all night. This time, it's going to be different for you. I know in my own personal life, my wife has often said to me, let's take the kids to Disney. And years ago, I just had a bad experience at Disney. It was a hot summer day, and I mean, literally, it felt like it was 110 in the shade. It was hot. It was humid. You stood in long lines, and I told myself I'll never come back to Disney and stand in line. If I want to stand in line, I can go to Publix in the supermarket and stand in line. But I said then, I'm not going to go back. And my wife used to ask me, why won't you go to Disney? And my response was, well, I went one time and it was a bad experience. You know what her response is? But this time it's going to be different. This time you're going to enjoy yourself. This time the lines aren't going to be as long. And so I have to confess, the last time I went, it wasn't nearly the way it was before. In fact, to be honest, we had a pleasant experience. And so for you, change of expectations. You're not going to toil all night long. You're not going to fail miserably. You're going to win. That's my point with Pastor Mark Boykin. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Until then, God bless you.